All right, so first things first, let's create a new Xcode project. And we're going to choose single view app, and I'm just going to call it seafood. So we're going to leave all of these unchecked as per usual, and we're going to hit next, and I will save it on my desktop. You can save it anywhere you like. So the first thing we need to do is to incorporate the pre-trained image recognition model into our brand new Xcode project. So to do that, we're going to head over to Chrome and you're going to go to developer.apple.com/machine-learning. And that will take you to Apple's new website that tells you a bit more about how you can add machine learning into your iOS projects and a whole bunch of documentation that is really, really useful. I highly recommend you reading through the Core ML and Vision documentations because we will be using them in our app. So if you scroll down, you'll see this part where it says working with models, and at present, they've got 4 ready-to-use models that you can download and start incorporating into your project. So the one that we're going to be using is Google's Inception v3. From various sources, as well as testing myself, I find that this seems to be working best in terms of image recognition compared to the other ones. So if you actually look at all 4, they're actually all image recognition models. But from my own experience, I find that this one works the best. So this is the one that we're going to be using in the tutorial. So go ahead and click download Core ML model, and you can see it's not actually all that big. It's about the size of a raw image file, so it's 94 megabytes and shouldn't take that long to download. All right, so once you've got it downloaded, you'll see that the file looks something like this. It's a .ml model file. So we're going to be dragging this into our Xcode project. So if you head over to your Xcode project, you're going to drag that Inception v3 file into the file structure of your Xcode project. So simply just click and drag and just drop it somewhere inside the seafood folder. Make sure that the checkbox copy item if needed is checked, and then go ahead and click finish. So that's going to take a little while as Xcode incorporates it into your project. But once it's done, you'll see it appear in the file structure. And also, if you click on it, you can actually see that Xcode has created a model class for this model that we just dropped in. You can actually see what that wrapper looks like. So here you can see that this is the variable that we're going to be working with the most. This is the Inception v3 model, and we're going to be using it to do all of our image recognition tasks. All right, so let's start writing some code and incorporate our model into our view controller. So first of all, I'm going to get rid of this did receive memory warning and this line of comments just to clean up the view controller so you can see more clearly what I'm doing. So the first thing we have to do when we use any sort of framework is, of course, import it. So I'm going to import Core ML, and I'm also going to import another new framework, which is called Vision. So Vision is going to help us process images more easily and allow us to use images to work with Core ML without writing a whole lot of code. So once we've imported all the frameworks that we need, the next thing that we need to do is to set up our UI image picker class. And this is going to allow us to tap into the camera as well as choose the image that we're going to use for our image recognition. So it's pretty straightforward, and I'll show you that it's actually pretty easy to get set up. So the first step in setting a UI image picker class is to declare some delegate protocols. So we're going to write comma UI image picker controller delegate. So there's actually quite a few that look all very, very similar. Just make sure that you pick the right one. Not UI picker controller delegate, but UI image picker controller delegate. And go ahead and hit enter. And for UI image picker controller to work, it also needs the UI navigation controller delegate. So we're going to add that here as well. So UI navigation controller delegate, not UI navigation controller, not any of the other ones. Make sure that it reads exactly the same as I've got here on the screen. Now, as I mentioned, the UI picker view delegate relies on a UI navigation controller delegate. So let's head over to the main.storyboard and embed our empty view controller inside a navigation controller. So do you remember how to do this? If you do, then go ahead and pause the video and just do it yourself. Otherwise, I'll show you how it's done. So if you don't remember, all you have to do is click on the view controller and make sure that that little yellow spot is selected, and then you go into editor and you go into embed in, and instead of tab bar controller, which is the one with the tabs at the bottom, we're going to pick Navigation Controller. So this gives us a free nav bar, which is that bar at the top, and allows us to navigate between screens very easily, going back and forth. Now, in the nav bar, we're going to add a button. So if you go into your object library and search for bar button item, then this is the first thing that should show up, and this is a free button that you get to use by incorporating the navigation controller. So you can go ahead and click and drag that, and we're going to just drop it on the top right hand corner. So this is the top right of our navigation bar. Now you can see by default it's called item, but instead we want to get a free image in here. So if you go ahead into the system item, instead of custom, we're going to change it to camera, and you can see we've got a nice little camera icon now set up. So while we're in the main.storyboard, let's finish setting up the rest of our interface. So if you go into, again, the object library and find an image view, this is the image view that we're going to be using to display the image that was taken from the camera or the image that was picked from the photo album. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it at the top and drag it to fill the entire view controller. Now I'm going to set some constraints so that it displays nicely on different screen sizes, and I'm going to constrain with 0 points to all 4 sides and make sure that the constraint and margins checkbox is unchecked. Go ahead and click Add 4 constraints. Now, ever since iOS 11, you'll see that it says that bottom and top layout guides are deprecated. Now, what this means is that the top part here and the bottom part here is no longer a valid constraint setting. Now, to fix this, all you need to do is to go into the File Inspector. If you scroll down, you can see that there is this option where it says Use Safe Area Layout Guides. And if you check it, your errors will go away because it will automatically replace the top and bottom layout guides with safe area layout guides, and you won't have any problems with that anymore. So now that the design is set up, of course, we need to set up some IB actions and IB outlets. So the first IB action I'm going to set up is the one from the camera. So we're just going to control and drag, and I'm going to call that camera tapped. Make sure that you change the connection to action, and I'm going to change the type to UI bar button item. Hit connect, and that's done. The next thing I want to do is control drag the UI image view, and I'm just going to call this image view. You can be more precise if you want, and you probably should be, especially if your project is going to be a lot bigger. But for demo purposes, I'm just going to call it image view because that makes the most sense at this stage. So let's go ahead and click enter or connect, and that will connect up our brand new image view. And there we go. And that's it. We're done with our design. So let's head back into our view controller and continue and finish setting up our UI Picker View delegate. So far, all that we've done for the UI Picker View delegate, i.e. enabling our app to use the camera and to pick images, is adding in these 2 delegate protocols. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new image picker object. So just below the IB outlet, I'm going to write let image picker equal UI image picker controller. And make sure you add the empty parentheses as we are creating a new object from the class UI image picker controller. So now that we've created our image picker object, the next thing we need to do is to set its delegate as this current class. So we're going to write image picker dot delegate equals self, i.e. this current view controller. Now, if you get any errors at this stage, just go back and check to make sure that up here you've got UI image picker controller delegate and UI navigation controller delegate. And when you've created your image picker, it is an object of the class UI image picker controller. Now, there's many variations that look really similar to all of these things, and it's very easy to trip up. So just double check if you're getting any errors when you're at this stage. So now that we've set our image pickers delegate, we're also going to set a couple of other properties, and namely that's the source type and the allows editing. So the first thing we're going to do is set the image picker dot source type property. And as you can see down here, it's the type of picker interface to be displayed by the controller. So the source type that we want is dot camera. So this brings up a UI image picker that contains the camera module, so allows the user to take an image using the front or the rear cameras. And this is probably the easiest way of implementing the camera functionality in any app. Now the next thing I want to set is the image picker's allows editing property. And this is a Boolean value, i.e. true or false, indicating whether the user is allowed to edit a selected image or movie. Now, if you're extending this app, you might want to allow editing, because then you can let the user crop the image so that your machine learning model has to work on less area and a more specific area to figure out what that item is. But for now, for ease and simplicity, we're just going to set the allows editing to false so we don't have to trigger that part. All right, so all the setup for our image picker is done. Now we have to specify when we want our image picker to appear. Now, the most logical point for it to appear is when the camera button is tapped, right? So all we have to do is to go into our IB action that we created earlier on, inside camera tapped, and say present, because it's a view controller, bracket, and we're going to pick this first one where we're presenting a view controller, and we can specify whether if it should be animated presentation or not, and also whether to do something once the presentation is done. So just go ahead and hit enter to insert all of that template code. And the view controller that we want to present is of course our image picker of the class UI image picker controller. So I'm just going to write image picker. Animated we'll set as true, and completion will set as nil. We don't really want anything to happen after we finish presenting that image picker, because we want our user to start taking photos. So let's just quickly recap what we've done. We've set this view controller, this current view controller, as a delegate of the UI image picker controller, as well as of the UI navigation controller. Then we created a new UI image picker controller object, and we set all of its properties, including its delegate, its source type, and whether if it allows editing. Finally, when the camera button gets tapped, we're asking the app to present this image picker to the user so that they can use the camera or use the photo album to pick an image. So what is the natural next step? Well, what should happen once they've picked that image? We should be sending that image to our machine learning model, right? So in order to address that time point, i.e. the time point where the user has picked an image, we need to add in a delegate method. And I'm going to add it just below the view did load and above the camera tapped IB action. Now, the delegate method comes from the UI image picker controller class, and it's called image picker controller did finish picking media with info. So I'm just going to start writing the most specific part of it, which is did finish picking media with info. And you can see I didn't even need to finish all of that, and Xcode has already suggested to me the one that I probably want. So this is the delegate method that tells the delegate, i.e. this view controller class, that the user has picked an image or a movie. So basically, this is the time point where they've picked an image, they're done, you want to do something with that image that they picked. So go ahead and hit enter, and I'm going to talk through some of these parameters. So the picker was the UI image picker controller that was used to pick the image. And in this case, that would be our image picker object here. The next thing is that did finish picking media with info, and the info is in the format of a dictionary. Now, inside the info parameter contains the image that the user picked, and we're going to tap into it inside this delegate method. So go ahead and click on that code placeholder and hit backspace to delete it. And the first thing that I'm going to check to make sure that an image was indeed picked, i.e. it wasn't nil. So to do that, I'm going to create a constant called image, and it is going to be set to the image that the user picked using the image picker controller. So to tap into it, I'm going to tap into this info parameter, which as you can see is a dictionary, and I'm going to specify the key that will yield that image that they picked. And the key is called UI image picker controller original image. And this is the original unedited image selected by the user. So this will be the image coming out of the camera or the original image that the user selected from the photo album. So go ahead and click enter for it to be automatically written. And now we have a way of accessing the image that the user has picked. So now that we've gotten hold of the image that the user has selected, the next thing we want to do is we want to set the image view in the background of the app to that image that they've picked. So in order to do that, remember that we had this IP outlet called image view. We're going to tap into it. So image view, and we're going to tap into its image property. So the image that it should be displaying, and we're going to set it to this image that the user picked. Now you can see here, as I'm typing it, firstly, it looks a little bit confusing because we called it image. We could have been more precise by calling it something like user picked image. And that way, when you're writing this line, you can see that this is a lot more explicit than having imageview.image equals image, right? So let's change that to that. So in this case, what we're trying to say is that the image view's image property should be set to the user picked image from that image picker controller. Now, you'll see that Xcode is going to give you an error saying that you can't assign a value of type any question mark, so an optional, to a type optional UI image. And the reason why it's saying this is because we're picking out an item from this info dictionary. We're providing a key to that dictionary, and we're getting a value out of that dictionary based from that key. But Xcode doesn't know what is the data type of that value because it's not explicit. As you can see here, that this info dictionary has a key data type of string, but a value data type of any, i.e. any data type. And that's not very specific. Now, the reason why it's giving you this error is because it doesn't want to try and put some piece of data that is not of UI image data type into the image view, because otherwise your app would crash. So this is why it's giving you that warning. So let's use optional binding and downcasting to make this more explicit. So I'm going to downcast this data type, which currently has a data type any, into a UI image view. To do that, I'm going to write the as question mark, and I'm going to write UI image. So now I'm saying that this data should be a UI image data type, but I'm going to also add an if in front of my let to make this an optional bind. So that means that if this piece of data can be downcast into a UI image data type, then you should execute this line of code in between these curly braces. And of course, what we want to happen is setting the image view's image property to that user picked image that we got out of there. And that makes our code safer, more readable, and more explicit, and all of our errors disappear. So the final thing that we need to do is we're going to dismiss that image picker and go back to our view controller. So it's very easy. All we have to do is just write image picker dot dismiss, animated true, completion nil. So let's now test out our app and see if it works. And you can see that the app crashes and you see an error log inside your debug console. So if you have a look in here, it says the problem is to do with access, and it says this app has crashed because it attempted to access privacy-sensitive data without a usage description. So that's pretty clear-cut, right? So all we need to do is to go into the info.plist, which you'll find in here, and we're going to add some property list keys. So go ahead to this line where it says information property list, click add, and if you scroll down, you'll see under privacy, you've got quite a few different privacy usage descriptions. The one that we want is the camera usage description. And this is basically something where we tell the user why we need their camera exactly. We're not spying on you. We just need it in order to make the app work. So I'm just going to write something like, we need your camera, yo. And remember, if you want to enable the user to pick an item from their photo album, you also need to add that privacy where it says privacy photo library usage. And you also need to add a description here. So we need your photos. There we go. Okay, so now if I rerun this app, you'll see it working beautifully. All right, so I'm going to tap on the camera button and you'll see that usage description show up. And I'm going to click OK to allow, and you can see that I've now tapped into the camera, and I can change between the front and the back cameras, and also I can take a photo. Now, once I've taken the photo, and if I click use photo instead of retaking, then it should dismiss that view controller, and it sets that image view to the image that I took just now. So brilliant, you've already managed to make the camera functionality work, and you've implemented the UI image picker controller. Now I'm going to show you quickly how you can modify your code so that the user can use their photo album instead of using the camera. So all you have to do is where it says here imagepicker.sourceType, instead of camera, all you have to do is just change it to a photo library. So now if we rerun the app, if I click on the camera button, you see that now it's asking to access all of my photos. All right, so in this lesson, we've learned how to implement the UI image picker controller delegate. We also learned how to incorporate a core machine learning model into our project. And you can see that both are pretty pain-free and really, really easy to do. So if you haven't done what I've done, go ahead and just follow along and code up your project up till now. In the next lesson, we're going to be tapping into that model and starting to get interpretations based on the trained model. So I'll see you there.